The message came at 9:47 p.m., just as Daniel was about to microwave another frozen dinner and convince himself he preferred the silence. He said yes. 2 words. That was all. Daniel stared at the screen like it was a mistake. He hadn't meant for it to happen. The date had been a half-hearted agreement after weeks of his sister insisting he needed to get back out there. A weekend set up with a woman named Hannah. Casual. Low expectations. No pressure. He had said yes because it was easier than saying no. But he hadn't realized that one small yes could quietly rearrange the rest of his life. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet miracles that sometimes walk into our lives when we least expect them, take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that sometimes, healing begins with one simple yes. Daniel hadn't always lived in silence. 3 years earlier, the apartment had echoed with laughter and arguments and the clatter of shared mornings. But after the divorce, the walls seemed to absorb sound instead of reflect it. He had poured himself into work, into longer hours and meaningless overtime. He told himself he was rebuilding. In truth, he was hiding. His ex-wife had moved on quickly. Photos on social media confirmed it. New cities. New smiles. Daniel muted everything but couldn't mute the feeling that he had somehow failed at the one thing that mattered most, building a family that lasted. So when his sister set him up with Hannah, a pediatric nurse who had the warmest heart in the world, Daniel agreed mostly to prove he wasn't bitter. He would show up, be polite, survive 2 hours of awkward small talk, and return to his predictable loneliness. The cafe they chose was small and sunlit, the kind of place where plants hung near the windows and old jazz hummed softly in the background. Daniel arrived early, as he always did. He ordered black coffee and rehearsed safe topics in his head: work, weather, harmless hobbies. When Hannah walked in, she wasn't what he expected. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wore a soft blue sweater and minimal makeup, her hair pulled back loosely as if she'd come straight from somewhere important. But what caught him off guard wasn't her appearance. It was the little hand wrapped around hers. A small boy, maybe 6 years old, with curious brown eyes and a backpack that looked almost as big as he was. Daniel felt his chest tighten. This hadn't been mentioned. Hannah smiled apologetically before even reaching the table. She explained that childcare had fallen through at the last minute and that she completely understood if Daniel wanted to reschedule. Her voice carried a mixture of embarrassment and quiet strength. She wasn't begging. She was simply being honest. Daniel could have left. Every part of him that feared complication, responsibility, and vulnerability urged him to politely excuse himself. Dating was already difficult. Dating someone with a child felt like stepping into waters he wasn't sure he could swim in. But then the boy looked up at him and gave a small, brave wave. And Daniel heard himself say it. It's okay. They sat down. The boy's name was Liam. He spoke little at first, staying close to his mother, quietly drawing on a napkin with crayons Hannah had brought in her purse. Daniel tried to focus on Hannah, on learning about her life, but he couldn't ignore the way she gently checked on Liam every few minutes, brushing crumbs from his shirt, asking if he needed water. There was no performance in it. No attempt to impress Daniel with maternal devotion. It was simply who she was. Midway through the date, Liam accidentally knocked over his juice. It spilled across the table and dripped onto Daniel's jeans. The cafe grew momentarily still. Hannah's face flushed. She scrambled for napkins, apologizing profusely. Daniel expected to feel irritation. Instead, something unexpected happened. He laughed. Not a forced chuckle. A real one. Warm and surprising, even to himself. "It's just juice," he said, and helped clean up. Liam looked at him differently after that. Not as a stranger, but as someone safe. The rest of the afternoon passed in a way Daniel hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't electric or dramatic. It was steady, comfortable, real. When they said goodbye outside the cafe, Hannah thanked him for being understanding. She admitted that dating as a single mother wasn't easy. Many men said they were fine with it, until reality showed up holding a backpack. Daniel went home that evening with juice-stained jeans and a strange warmth in his chest. He told himself it was nothing. But he agreed to a second date. The next weekend, they went to the park. Liam insisted on showing Daniel how high he could climb on the jungle gym. Daniel found himself standing below, instinctively ready to catch him if he fell. That instinct scared him. He had spent years building walls around his heart, convincing himself he wasn't meant to be a father. That chapter, he assumed, had closed when his marriage ended without children. Yet here he was, pushing a swing gently and listening to a 6-year-old explain the rules of an imaginary superhero game. Hannah watched them from a bench, something unreadable in her expression. It wasn't hope exactly. It was caution. She had been hurt too. Her ex had left when Liam was barely a year old, promising to return once he figured himself out. He never did. Daniel learned that Hannah worked long hospital shifts and still made it to every school event. That she stayed up late sewing Halloween costumes because Liam wanted to be unique. That she hadn't been on a date in over 2 years. She wasn't searching for a savior. She was protecting her son. Weeks turned into a month. Daniel became a familiar presence. Movie nights with animated films he secretly enjoyed. Saturday mornings at the farmer's market. Liam asking if Daniel could help him build a model rocket for school. And with every passing day, Daniel felt something fragile and terrifying grow inside him. He was beginning to care. Not just for Hannah. For both of them. The challenge wasn't external. It was internal. Daniel feared becoming attached to something he could lose. He feared disappointing Liam if things didn't work out. He feared stepping into a role he wasn't sure he deserved. One evening, after dropping them off, Daniel sat alone in his car for a long time. He realized that for the first time since his divorce, he didn't want to return to an empty apartment. He wanted the noise, the scattered toys, the soft chaos. But love, especially the kind that includes a child, isn't just about desire. It's about responsibility. The turning point came unexpectedly. Liam's school called Hannah one afternoon. He had gotten into a fight with another boy who teased him about not having a dad. Hannah arrived at the principal's office exhausted from a double shift. Daniel, who had taken the day off to surprise them with lunch, met them there. Liam sat small and defiant, eyes red from holding back tears. Daniel saw himself in that stubborn silence. He remembered being a boy who pretended not to care when he did. That night, Liam didn't speak much. He went to bed early. Hannah apologized again, for the complication, for the reality of dating a woman with baggage. Daniel stopped her gently. Because for the first time, he understood something clearly. This wasn't baggage. This was a life. And he wanted to be part of it. The next morning, Daniel showed up with breakfast and an idea. He asked Liam if he would help him build something in the backyard, a small wooden treehouse. It wasn't fancy, just a simple structure, but it became their project. Over the following weekends, they measured, hammered, and painted together. Liam's confidence grew with every nail he drove in crookedly and corrected. Daniel taught him patience. Liam taught Daniel joy. Hannah watched it all unfold with quiet tears she tried to hide. Daniel realized that family wasn't something you inherited perfectly packaged. It was something you built, piece by piece, even when your hands shook. Months passed. The treehouse stood solid. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky gold, Liam asked Daniel if he thought he would ever have a dad. The question hung in the air like fragile glass. Daniel felt fear rise in his throat. Not because he didn't want to answer, but because he finally knew he did. He knelt down, looking into Liam's hopeful eyes, and understood that saying yes to a weekend date had never just been about romance. It had been about destiny disguised as inconvenience. If this story has touched your heart so far, take a moment to engage with it. Like the video, share it with someone who believes in unexpected blessings, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps these stories reach more hearts than you know. And before we reach the end, here's a special request. Comment the word yes if you believe one small decision can change an entire life. Daniel didn't rush his answer that evening. He told Liam that sometimes fathers aren't the ones who leave. Sometimes they're the ones who choose to stay. And he intended to stay. A year later, the apartment Daniel once dreaded returning to was no longer silent. It was filled with mismatched socks, crayon drawings on the refrigerator, and laughter that echoed against walls that no longer absorbed joy. He had officially moved in. The proposal wasn't extravagant. It happened in the treehouse they built together. Hannah cried before he even finished asking. Liam hugged them both so tightly Daniel thought his heart might burst. On their wedding day, as Daniel stood at the end of the aisle watching Hannah walk toward him, Liam stood proudly by his side as the ring bearer. But the most powerful moment came during the vows. Daniel promised not just to love Hannah, but to protect, guide, and cherish the small boy who had once spilled juice on his jeans and unknowingly poured life back into his empty heart. Years from now, Daniel would look back and realize the truth. He hadn't said yes to a date. He had said yes to healing. Yes to risk. Yes to a family he didn't know he needed. And in choosing them, he had finally chosen himself. If this story moved you even a little, don't scroll away quietly. Like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more stories that remind us love often arrives disguised as inconvenience. Because sometimes, the smallest yes becomes the greatest gift of all. And somewhere in a backyard, under the shade of a simple wooden treehouse, a man who once feared loneliness now wakes each morning to the sound of someone calling him dad.